Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Chess Masters. Today, we are going to be looking at rooks on the 7th rank. What are rooks on the 7th rank? Well, it's pretty explanatory. It's putting your rook on the 7th rank. See that 7? And for black, it's putting your rook on the 2nd rank, where all these pawns start off. So, we have 3 positions today, and I'm going to show you the first move. So, in this position, it's an endgame position, and it starts off with a pretty interesting move, Rook e7. Now, YawningAstronaut is going to explain why this move is helpful and what it can do to strengthen your position.
Notice here that black is not winning. Their king and rook are stuck in the corner, their knight's not really doing anything, and of course their bishop's on the edge of their board, which isn't really helpful. However, there is one important thing that white can do here, rook to e7, that attacks almost all of white's material and weakens their black's material. So in this case, after rook to e7, c7, b7, and a7 are all under fire. There is no way to save the c7 pawn. For example, if black were to try something like knight to e8, well, that's a free knight, and it's also checkmate. If black were to try knight d5, obviously there's multiple attackers there, so that doesn't work. Also, when pushing forward the c pawn, the b pawn is now exposed. So you can see how here there's no way to defend the pawn. So g5 is played, which gives the king some escape room in case there's ever a possible mate. Let's move on to the next move here. After white takes the free pawn, black has to try and defend their b pawn, because this pawn could potentially be easier to promote than an a pawn. We'll have a video on this later on rook pawns versus knight pawns. In this position, black's going to try for b6, because this saves that pawn temporarily, though you'll see later that it becomes very weak. Then, the rook takes the a pawn, and you can see, in the span of 2 moves, we've won 2 pawns. Now, after king to g7, the only real way to let the rook out, white plays rook to b7, which attacks this pawn. There is no real way to defend this safely. As you can see, knight to d5 doesn't work, and you can't play knight to d7 because the rook would capture. Now, continuing into the game, white has a big lead, but white needs to make sure that their king is safe. So a probable following move after we take the pawn is probably something like h3 or g3. Now let's move on to the next position.
Okay, this is our next position, and it's fairly more complicated than our previous one. It's no longer an endgame position, it's more of a middle game. Of course, it's not the middle game, it's kind of transitioning into an endgame. So it's still not super duper complicated. So, the first move that starts off is bishop to d3. Now, you'll see why this move is good in just a minute. The move that follows, that black plays, is rook to g8. And then white goes straight in to enemy territory with the move rook to e7. Now, this move is actually incredibly good for several reasons. One, if the queen, obviously the queen can't take because you just take back. And although it is a queen for 2 rooks, there are some serious possibilities of a checkmate on the h-file. And of course, the knight can't just directly take because that opens up an attack for the bishop on d3, leading straight to a checkmate. Now, the move that comes right after this is rook to g7. Rook to g7 attempts to guard the 7th rank and the possible checkmate. But as you can see in this position, black is having to play defense and kind of make sure all his pieces are secure and that he's not going to lose anything or any significant material. Whereas white has no reason to worry and is just going right on the offense. And so this really tells you why putting your rook on the 7th or the 2nd rank can be really, really deadly for your opponent. Let's move on to the next example.
All right, so in this position, black starts out, it's black's turn, and he dives in and sees the move knight to b4, forking the rook and the queen. This seems like a very good move, but once the white rook takes on c7, it becomes very bad for black. So white plays rook takes c7. Now, if black gets greedy and takes the queen, then there are some serious mate threats. So black indeed takes a2. And after this, then it's just 3-move mate. The white rook takes on g7, giving the king only one escape square, h8. And then the white rook keeps the pressure by taking h7, giving, once again, only one escape square. After the king moves to g8, then mate comes with rook to g7, mating the king. His own rook blocks it. This 7th rank example, it can ground the king in its place.
Thanks for watching. Today, we looked at 3 different positions of rooks on the 7th rank. Be sure to look out for rooks on the 7th rank and use them in your own games. If you enjoy our videos, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. That's it. Thanks for watching.